Good afternoon and welcome back to the basement of the Jacobs estate for another edition of the Basement Tapes. Last time out, we tied a fly that involved the use of a pheasant aftershaft feather, or as our Freundin in Frankfurt would call it, an after feather. It was a mop fly then. This time it's going to be a fly from the brilliant mind of fly designer and raconteur and bon vivant Jack Gartside. Gartside was a fellow who had been an English teacher in the Boston public school system, but quit after legendarily, a student set fire to his desk. He just thought it would be safer to be a cabbie in Boston than to be a school teacher at a public school there. He, being a cabbie, also allowed him to take as much time off as he could possibly afford. He fished around the world on virtually no budget. The fly we're going to tie today is a Gartside Sparrow Nymph. Supposedly, the legend goes that Gartside developed that one summer when he was living in a tent in a campground in Yellowstone National Park. Nearly broke. Took what little money he had, hitchhiked into West Yellowstone. Thought he had to buy the most materials to get the biggest bang for the buck he possibly could. He bought a pheasant skin, and out of that he developed this fly. It involves the use of sort of pheasant marabou, a little bit of dubbing, a pheasant rump feather, and a pheasant aftershaft feather. Very inexpensive fly to tie. We'll talk a little bit later about how to fish it. So let's just leap right into the tying. I like typically to tie these on a 5263 Tiemco size 10. That's their streamer hook. You could tie it on a variety of wet fly hooks or even the Tiemco 200R if you chose. I just like the looks and proportion that I get out of this. The other materials are very few. There's 6/0, well, I'm using olive dun unithread in this case. Any dark 6/0 thread I think would do. That's going to have, at the base of a pheasant tail rump, you'll find these sort of marabou-like feathers down in this area. That'll be the tail. I'm going to use Senew's laser dub in olive for the body, although this life cycle nymph dubbing from Wapsie in an olive would probably work just as well. And then a pheasant rump feather to form the collar and an aftershaft feather to form the head of the fly. There's our fly. There's our hook and the vise. So let's get underway here. We'll start the thread at about 1/3 of the way back on the hook. That'll remind us to save room to finish the fly with that collar and the aftershaft head. We'll cut away our excess thread here. Find one of those little marabou type feathers. And tail length is not critical. I would say probably 1/3 of shank length or something like that. You don't want it too long. It'll drag behind. Get that started. Get it secured. Trim off the excess. Bind that down well. Get back to the back of the fly. This will be a little shaggy, but again, it really doesn't much matter because you're going to be covering it up anyway, and it just serves as sort of an underbody. You can dub the body in a fairly robust fashion. Here you kind of want to create that carrot shape. You want it to increase in diameter as we move forward on the hook. So we get our dubbing going. That's spun out a little better than that. See that we're creating a somewhat larger diameter as we proceed forward here. Maybe just another touch of dubbing here. There we are, that's about right. Then the very, very rump feather, you'll find them down in here. at the very, very back of the. This is not exactly the rump; it's more or less the rear back of the cock ringneck pheasant. And to prepare that feather, we'll want to get rid of this fuzz on either side of the shaft. Just strip that away like that. See that? Get rid of just, well, that's not bad. We'll trim that short, trim away a little bit more. We'll put a little tooth to each side to help bind that in. Then you'll want to do this so that the natural curvature of the feather is arcing backward. There we have that. And we'll just wind that feather till we've used all that we can. These things are a little fragile at their very tips, so you might expect to have to do this more than once to get it in there as you want. You can kind of, as in with any soft tackle collar, you can kind of fold that back as you go to keep from burying it, just ending up with a wad of fibers rather than a nice splayed all the way around the hook look that you're looking for. And then when you think you've used about all the feather that you can, just throw the thread over that, secure it, trim that tip out of there. We'll sweep this back with our 3 fingers here, the two fingers and your thumb of your material hand. Throw just a couple of wraps over that to try to get it to lay back just a little bit, but these are soft feathers, and the motion in the water will take care of that for you too. Then we'll secure an after shaft feather. Strip away just a little tiny bit of that. And again, these are even more fragile than the tail feather, or that rump feather. So we're going to have to be patient here. Again, we'll attach our. This is an interesting hackle plier. It's got this rubber ring on it that will sort of take up some of the tension. This one I think came from Loon. Excuse me, this is the Tiemco one. They're excellent for working with fragile feathers like this because there's just that little bit of take up. We can kind of lay that back over itself too to get it out of the way. And there we are. One more time into the breech. There we go. Third time's a charm, right? I've thought at times about perhaps tying in some 4-pound monofilament or something ahead of the collar, and perhaps reinforcing this a little bit. But all in all, it seems like it has greater durability once it's tied down than it does while you're working with it. It hasn't been necessary. There we are. Then we'll again take our fingers, get that back out of the way, form a head. Take a whip finish tool. Excuse me. Make a tight little whip finish there. Cement. Trim away our thread. Let's get rid of this. One looks just a little out of place, doesn't it? There we go. I'm going to sweep that back a little bit. You can see in the water that this is all going to flow back quite nicely. We'll get a little head cement on there too. Gartside wanted flies that he could make the most use of, and not only cheap materials and so on, but fish across the broadest possible array of circumstances too. So he suggested that fished upstream on a dead drift that this might look to a fish like a drowning grasshopper or drowned grasshopper. I think on the swing on a tight line, it could look like an emerging insect rising to the surface. fished shallow upstream and stripped back toward you, it might look like a small minnow of some kind to a trout, or it might look like a damselfly nymph or dragonfly nymph too, that's motoring around. I think either with weight on the leader or a sink tip and a short leader, fished very deep, I think it could actually make an adequate sculpin imitation too. It's just a very versatile fly, as you can see, quick and easy to tie out of cheap materials. I'd suggest that you Google up the name Jack Gartside. Fascinating character, gone too soon at the age of 66, but his legacy lives on. Now, in the meantime, let's keep avoiding the coronavirus as all that we can. Stay safe, keep your family safe, and remember that if you're part of the fly fishing community, to try to look after your local fly shop and your local guiding service as much as you can. All right? Have a good day. Bye now.